Welcome to A Lunch with Biggie, a podcast about small business and creatives sharing their stories and inspiring you. My guest today was actually my second guest ever. He is the maker and creator of Transforming Your Beard with All Natural Care with handmade beard oils, balms, and soap. He's also the man behind a new market that's coming to Orlando. It's the newest indoor market, Orlando Indie Bazaar. Please welcome my friend and fellow friender as well, Kelly Brott from Brott's Beard Care and Orlando Indie Bazaar. What's going on, man?
Hey, Biggie, man, happy to be back with you.
Yeah, man, been forever. I jokingly said in the intro, obviously, that we've talked more than once because the first time I ever decided to do a podcast, Kelly was my initial guinea pig when I was thinking about it, and then once I finally was ready to do it, I had him on again because obviously I needed to have him on. So it's super a pleasure to be able to kind of have a talk about something new that you're doing. But first, I got to know, what's your go-to lunch or sandwich?
Okay, so I've got a couple quick answers for you on this.
Okay.
Favorite sandwich, which is what I said last time, is always going to be a muffaletta. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of good places to get them in Orlando. I have to give a shout out to Smoke Made Meats. Was there this weekend and had their brisket sandwich, which was amazing.
Yes.
And then kind of my little go-to sandwich. I use this sometimes as like lunch, and I actually do this sometimes as a quick snack, and it's super simple. I take a piece of bread, sometimes like a bun or something like that, a little bit of peanut butter, definitely, crunchy peanut butter, and then just drizzle it with honey, and that's it.
I like how you specified on the crunchy peanut butter because
Oh,
most
yeah.
people not as many love the crunchy as they prefer a smooth versus a crunchy, which so I like hearing that. So I mentioned, and obviously I wanted to chat with you. I know, like, I've had you on. If people were to go back, I think I've done like almost close to 100. I think you're my 170th guest or 170th episode. So if you go back to like episode 1 or 2, you'll probably see Kelly and be able to hear quite a bit and see quite a bit of an evolution. But I kind of wanted you to, for those that have not maybe heard your story, I wanted a quick lunch break version of why you started Brott's Beard Care, and just tell people a little bit about that, what it is, and what made you decide to start that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brott's Beard Care started, gosh, we're looking at about 12 years ago when I was really growing kind of my first beard. And there just weren't products out there that were working. I finally found one product and the scent was awful. It worked great, but I didn't love how it smelled. So I started making my own. And at that point, when I would make a batch, I would have extra. I just started sharing it with friends. And as they ran out, they started coming back asking if I could give them more of the beard care product. And I thought, well, man, why don't I just do it as a business? Because I had a hard time finding it myself. And then at that point, I did it part time, just as a little side hustle for about a year and a half. And then it went full time. And actually, just this past June, I celebrated 10 years in business.
Yeah, man. I can't. That's something. It's funny because when I saw 10 years, I was like, really? I'm like, but it makes sense because you did it. Like you mentioned, 12 years kind of doing it, and then it finally became a business officially type of thing. So 10 years doing it that way. I'm kind of curious on what you think have been some of the challenges you faced the last 10 years running the brand.
Oh, man, gosh, there's been challenges throughout. Probably the biggest one, and I think for a lot of people, was during COVID, just not having opportunities to get the brand out there and talk to people and share it with people. Luckily, at that point, I'd been in business for about 5 years, so I had established a pretty good amount of business through my website, and that kind of took me through that time frame. Obviously there were some supply chain issues at that point. Certain ingredients and supplies were harder to get. But I mean, that was just a little blip. Now kind of in the radar. Probably more recent challenges is just always finding good places to showcase your product. And I feel like I've gone through a transition where my first 5 years I was mainly doing outdoor farmers markets in the same location every week, every Saturday and Sunday. And it was great because I had a chance to build the brand. Then I kind of shifted into traveling, and I was going outside of Orlando as well as outside of the state, and kind of seeing how that model worked for the business, and if it made sense, because it was a great way to kind of expose new people to the brand and then obviously bring them to the website for future purchases. Now I think I've kind of shifted to where it's a little bit of a hybrid between the two. I've learned certain things about traveling that work and don't work. And then, of course, you like having those kind of local close events. And then more recently, I feel like I'm maybe just getting a little bit tired of, kind of the grind of doing outside events in Florida. And that's kind of what's, sort of leading me to doing more indoor events.
So very good. These moments like this make me happy when it's like the conversation transitions exactly how I want it to. And that's because you and I have done, you have your fair share of stories of what you've experienced outside with, like, especially living in Florida and the heat and everything like that. And in the summer, it's one of those where for a lot of brands, like it's a level of dedication for those brands that sit out in the summer within the extreme heat and then the torrential downpours of having to deal with all those things. And to be honest, we've had numerous times talking about opportunities to come up of like, hey, there should be more more kind of indoor opportunities, air conditioned, where people can go in and kind of be able to do shop and stuff like that. So I want to be able to talk about your newest idea, what made you want to come up with the idea, and how difficult has it so far been. I know obviously it hasn't occurred yet, but obviously you're going through the learning curves of trying to do this, but you're wanting to do an indoor market, the Orlando Indie Bazaar. Tell people a little bit about it and kind of like and what the journey's been so far with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the idea probably started, you know, gosh, even I'd say 3, maybe 4 years ago. And it was really you and I had conversations about how we wanted, some indoor places that we could, kind of showcase our brands. And there just weren't that many opportunities, at least in Orlando. I do a lot of indoor events in other cities, and that's why I always felt like it would be a good idea here. There's a few kind of event planners that we've talked to in the area that we've always kind of tried to sort of ask them if they would do something. And it just never really happened. And sometimes, I wasn't quite sure why. As I've worked on the business, I think I understand it a little bit more is that Orlando just doesn't have a lot of the indoor venues that work perfectly for an event like this. The venue space is too small. It could be too big. There's been issues where, some spaces just don't have adequate parking. So there's always been a lot of little things about how it's just not hasn't quite worked. But I think there are more places and venues coming to Orlando, so I think it's opened it up a little bit and given us that opportunity to try to give it a go. And I think even like last year, you and I toured a couple of spots, kind of seeing if we could get this going last year, and we found some really beautiful places. But sometimes the price just didn't make sense because ultimately I want a space where I feel comfortable as a vendor. That way I know other vendors would too. And I want it to be not super expensive. So some of the venues, it would just cause us to have ridiculously high vendor fees. So that's really kind of been, sort of the evolution of it. And I finally just decided this summer, I was like, you know what? I've talked about it too much. I'm just going to make it happen, and I'm in that process of doing it. And we've got just under a couple of weeks away before we launch and do our first show.
Yeah, man. I'm excited. I'm excited for it. I want you to talk a little bit about what people can expect when they come on Sunday, August 24th, 11 to 5, where it'll be, what kind of how all that kind of came about, and then also kind of, you can name names or you can kind of give people at least an idea of what kind of things they can expect, vendor style and different types of vendors that are going to be available there, how many vendors will be there, anything that you can provide or share, I think will be great for people to be able to listen to, because I think people just need to know, hey, there's a lot of different great vendors going to be available there to sell. And at the same time, I will be obviously be there as well selling. I'm excited for it. I like indoor. I'm like, man, indoor markets are the way to go. After being stuck in the heat, I'm like, it just makes sense to be able to have that.
Yeah, of course. So, well, first I'll start with location. We're actually doing it at the Hilton Orlando in Altamonte Springs. It's very close to, kind of uptown Altamont and the Altamont Mall, just about gosh, probably not even a mile south of that. So it's a pretty centralized location. I chose the Hilton ultimately for a couple of reasons. One, it had a good what I call medium-sized space. So it's bigger than some of the pop-ups that you see at like a brewery, but it's not a massive event, that is going to be at a convention center or something like that. Ideally, I think right now we're a little over 40 vendors. Could probably add another 10 or so to that potentially. But it's just a nice mix of kind of handmade, crafted, goods. There's clothing brands that are going to be there. We've got vendors that sell plants and home decor, bath and body products, different options like that. Some really cool artists. Just got a guy signed up the other day. He's a local kid. He's a teenager that's actually written a couple of comic books. So he's going to be out there himself displaying his artwork. And actually, I don't think it's his artwork. I think he's the writer, but his books that he's actually selling and trying to make away with that. There's going to be a little bit of everything. Of course, as we've talked, it's indoors, so it's climate controlled. You don't have to worry about the heat, the rain, anything like that. So it's a nice, comfortable space. What's nice too about utilizing the Hilton is that they have their own restaurant and bar on site. So there's opportunity to grab a coffee, an adult beverage, a snack, food, anything like that. And have that before, after, or during, the shopping experience. I also loved it because it's got a huge parking lot and parking's free. And that's one of the tough things with some of the other locations I looked at is that there just wasn't adequate parking or there was a cost that was prohibitive to that. And I just want to make it as easy as I can for our vendors and also for our guests to come shop.
I'm kind of curious because when you, and I know you probably have spoken, can you talk a little bit about I don't know, just the whole aspect of why you think, do you think it's so difficult to find a location because of that, of the parking and all those things and the size and the cost? Like besides that, what do you think has been the hindrance of this? Because like you would think more and more there would be more of this. It's kind of almost like general sports, like how like they want to like update all these stadiums, but they're like, well, put some kind of like shade or roof or something to it, like open it up when we need it to, but make it like, when it's hot and ugly, like let's make it more, a little bit more tolerable. Why do you think it's been so difficult for markets like this to happen in Central Florida?
It's hard to say for sure. I mean, I have an opinion, and I think it really comes down to the cost of the venue. Because I mean, I want to say there's hundreds, but there are tons of little small 1 day events, whether they're outside pop ups, they're in breweries. And I know a lot of those places, the cost to the organizer is probably nothing or very little, just because the businesses are kind of happy to have something else there on site and showcasing them. So I think it really comes down to that cost because when you start looking at venues that are kind of a medium-sized venue that could handle anywhere between 50 to 100 vendors, or if you did something bigger than that, there's a big expense just in renting the facility. And I just think it's probably prohibited some people from trying it, just because it is a little bit of a leap of faith, because you just don't really know if you're going to be able to fill the vendors and if you're going to get people to come out and shop. And if you don't, that's a pretty big loss financially that you could
Yeah.
get.
Speaking since as you going through this, because I've talked to like Courtney, who used to do the DeLand Indie Market and Sanford Indie Market, and I talked to a few others that have done markets. Can we talk a little bit about, and obviously even more of a stress, being that you're doing your first indoor market and you have 40 vendors on there, the importance of getting the word out, of having those vendors spread the word, talk about and share, hey, I'm going to be here, post it on certain things. Like how important and crucial is that for the success of an event? Because I know sometimes there's an onus, and you and I have talked about this, where you're like the host, you're like, well, you're the host, you should be able to promote it, but it is a two-way street. Like we're all helping each other type of thing. It's like we all want to make money and we need people to make money.
Right. And I think you use the word crucial, and I think that is really a great way to describe it. I mean, an organizer of an event can only do so much, and the best way that they can promote it, or I can promote this event personally, is really, I mean, one is just kind of grassroots stuff, getting out there, doing social media, doing some paid advertising, reaching out to local podcasts, radio stations, TV stations, but you just don't really know because you don't get that return on it. You don't know what's going to happen. But I think that's where it becomes super important that you do get the vendors to participate in promoting the event, because every vendor, yourself, myself, all of them out there, I mean, we all have a following. That's going back to what social media was kind of designed for, was to kind of use that network of other people. And if everybody can do just a little bit and bring 1, 2, 5, 10 of their followers out there, when you look at 40 or 50 vendors and they can all get 5 to 10 people to come out, those are dedicated people that support you and obviously will support some of your fellow vendors. And you and I have talked about this before. It's kind of amazing that not every vendor is willing to participate and help. And maybe they don't think they've got a big enough following, but I mean, every little bit helps. And it just blows my mind that you get a certain percentage of them that will do a wonderful job. I mean, they'll post, they'll tag, they'll share, they're telling their friends and family. But then you get just a group of them that don't. And it just blows me away because, I mean, ultimately, they're going to set up as a business and they want to sell, they want to make money. They don't want to, waste their time, and they don't want to be frustrated, if they sit there and people don't come out and they just sit there all day. So the best way you can, avoid that from happening is to have everybody help out and kind of share that burden a little bit. But I do think it's important that as the person that's running the event, especially starting out, I mean, you've got to put some money in the game. I mean, you've got to spend some money financially to promote it and get it in front of as many eyes as you can. And then hopefully, as you build that audience and build a following, you don't have to do as much, in financial marketing, and you can rely more on word of mouth and just your reputation.
That's I think that's so accurate, and I do agree with that. It's like the fact of and it's always hard because even when, like, in my own world, trying to spread the word, sometimes you spread it and you're like, I don't know who's going to listen and who's not. And then it's also the fact that sometimes, there's like that almost like a delay. Like, you could post something and then they may not see it for a few days. So it's
Right.
like you almost need that lag or that, kind of build that momentum up as you go before, as the event comes up, to be able to let more and more people know. I know for me, that's one of my favorite things, is to be able to see people that show up and, that I've either brought up or they saw it or they're aware of it because they follow that. And then obviously the interaction of meeting new people. I think it's just, like I said, it's crucial for the success of an event, because once an event, builds that kind of like that fandom, then it just makes it a heck of a lot easier to kind of be able to do more and more and be able to have, do different and hopefully do more indoor events.
Right.
That's kind of what you want. So yeah, man, I think I commend you, because this is something, like I said, you and I have talked about this for many years, because there isn't enough there's a lot of markets. Some markets are larger, are getting bigger and bigger, and then it just becomes it's a little bit sometimes harder to maneuver, and then everyone's kind of like battling each other. And then you also have some markets that, there's just always a market. So I mean, there are a lot of things to happen in Orlando, but it's nice to be able to have something, especially in, like I said, the summer heat, be able to do something inside, try something new. And I commend you for that, because it's definitely, I know it's got to be scary, exciting, and scary at the same time, is how I kind of look at it.
Yep. That's exactly what it is, man. It's been an emotional roller coaster because there's just been highs and lows with it. Obviously, when I decided to do it, I was super excited. When I signed the contract, I was terrified because when you see the amount of money that you're spending, you're just like, oh my God, what the hell am I doing? What if this doesn't work? And then, as I, launched the application, I did get a ton of people responding right off the bat. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to have enough vendors to even fill this place, and it's going to look ridiculous. And then you build momentum on that. So it really has. It's been an absolute roller coaster, and I still know I've got more ups and downs in these next couple of weeks as we figure it out. And then of course the day of the event. So we'll see. I mean, I'm excited to do it. If it doesn't work, I'm going to keep trying it. I mean, I don't think you can, put all your, your success on just one event. It's going to take time to build it, but I'm certainly doing everything I can to make this first one a good experience for everybody. And then that'll just make it that much easier to do more of them in the future. But yeah, it's been wild.
You so I'm kind of curious now because of the fact, and I know, and we may have to have a conversation again after, because I want to know after the fact. But as of right now, in the wearing the different hat, so obviously I only know the vendor side of it, of me trying to do everything like that. And yeah, and I'm assuming you've had conversations with some folks that have run events, but like, have you started noticing or seeing like the difference, because now you're wearing a different hat as well? So like, are you seeing things that you didn't think were an issue, or things that are popping up now that you're like, wow, I didn't even think of, like, this would be something I'd have to deal with or handle or anything like that? And I know you still got a lot of runway before the event, but have you come across some things like that already, or is pretty much everything that you've expected has kind of been what it is?
Well, yes and no. There hasn't been anything that has surprised me that I didn't think would happen. There are things that I thought would be easy that were not easy. One, before I even did anything, I mean, I had a list of probably 80 to 100 vendors that I've come across and you've come across and we've actually had interaction with. And I thought, okay, I've got this list of 100 people and I'll just reach out to them and I'll fill this event no problem. And I won't even have to, put out an application and seek new vendors. Man, that didn't happen. And part of it is like certain vendors I couldn't bring in. So, because it is at the hotel and they have their own food and beverage, that kind of excludes some of the like food trucks and food and beverage vendors. So that shrunk the list. As I talk to other vendors, sometimes they've got other events already booked. Some have vacations, different things that happen. So it really kind of shrunk that initial list of what I thought, I would be able to get. So that's been a challenge for sure that I thought wouldn't be that hard. The second part is getting people to pay for their spaces, man. It's crazy. From a vendor standpoint, I've always just thought, you know what? I mean, as soon as the invoice comes or as soon as they tell me I'm in, I pay it to make sure I secure my spot. And with this one, it's just been kind of like herding cats, man. There's some people that are on top of it, and some people I think I've sent 10 or 15 invoices to, and they're still just kind of dragging their feet. There are some that have reached out and said, hey, can I have a little more time? And that's, I'm definitely willing to work with people on that. So I understand that, we're not all made of money, and that as a vendor, we're trying to kind of balance doing events all year round. So it's hard to pay for events ahead of time, and because of that, I think with this event had a little bit of a shorter time frame to get it going. But I've got some ideas for future events where I think I can make that process simpler, easier, both on myself and on the vendors, and kind of spread that hit out over time, versus just kind of a lump sum. You got to pay your full invoice right off the bat. Those are probably the two biggest things. Um, I think the everything else is kind of what I expected. Now, certainly when we get to the day of the event, I know there's going to be something that's going to pop up, and I'm going to be like, oh crap, how did I not think of that? But other than that, I mean, we're just kind of doing a wait and see, and kind of learn as we go.
No, man. Again, super. It's so super. I totally commend you. It's definitely one of those where it is, from seeing others and how they do it. Some do it seamlessly. Others, it's kind of like, you kind of have to. And what I'm hoping for is the fact that since it's indoors, controlled atmosphere, controlled environment type of thing, you're not at least dealing with the craziness of the outdoors in there. And then and what I'm looking for is a definitely a successful event. I think it's I'm very excited to see you do this. I'm excited for Orlando Indie Bazaar to kind of grow and become something new for you to be able to do, and at the same time also be able to provide another venue or another option for all the local small businesses and businesses in Central Florida to come and be able to actually sell their product in a indoors and in a fun atmosphere. So I think it's I'm excited. I'm excited for August 24th, 11 to 5 on in at the Hilton in Altamonte Springs. Have you and obviously I could ask this off air, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. have you reached out to or started looking at reaching out to like seeing like the folks in Altamonte Springs, like the community or anything like that, like to kind of let them know? I know like sometimes Sanford has like a I don't know, like a Sanford page that does like, oh, here's what's going on, like downtown Sanford and stuff like that. Are there things like that or people like that that you can that you can reach out to and share and let them know, hey, this is coming, to kind of help promote, so that way the community also comes? Because I think what happens is, and I'll throw this out there just because I kind of, because originally when I started looking or think, I thought of the idea too. I was like, hey, this would be really cool. We could do it in Oviedo. And I think a lot of times what happens is some vendors and some people and some things, they get stuck on the idea that it's got to be in Orlando, which is like good and bad. It's got to be in Orlando. It's got to do this. Like no one's going to travel, even though everyone has to travel in Orlando, in Central Florida. Everyone's got to go somewhere to be able to do something. And so a lot of times when you're like, hey, we're going to do this, and it's not going to be at one of the spots, then some people are like, oh, that's not going to work because you got to drive. And you got to drive to there. No one's going to drive there. Well, yeah, people will drive there if it's because they did it in Oviedo for like like the Goblin Market in Oviedo, and things like that, like markets that people don't expect. It's just you just have to build the community for it. And I think people are willing to drive, especially locally. And that's why I was curious, like Altamonte Springs, if they're aware of it, that it's coming, because I think that'll be a great way to harness the community to come do some shopping. Especially also, it's still no taxes on no sales tax on clothing.
Hmm.
Still the whole month.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, reaching out to the community is crucial. Um, I mean, for me, it's been kind of a progression. Obviously, getting the space secured was kind of the first hurdle. Getting the vendors to fill it took a little longer, and took more focus than I thought it was going to be. And then my focus has kind of shifted. Obviously in the last 2 weeks in order to really promote the event. And I've done that, through social media. Initially, I was just, kind of doing some general awareness, in the Orlando area. But now some of the ads that I'm running are more targeted to, kind of a specific location. So, kind of dropping a little pin in the Altamont area and showing those social media ads, to the people in that community. Definitely, I know in Winter Garden where I'm at, there's different Facebook groups that are dedicated to that. So that's kind of my next couple of days, is to start to reach out to see if I can contact and post, and connect with some of those groups that are more local to Altamont. But like you said, you have to drive everywhere you go in Orlando. I feel like Altamont is centralized enough to where you can pull from a lot of different areas, and it's not too big of a trip. But again, I think that comes down to taking away some of the other hurdles. Having free parking, free admission, things like that. To take that away, and then hopefully that'll incentivize more people to come out. And then again, just utilizing all of our networks. And like I said, if we can all get a few of our friends to come out to share it with their friends,
Yeah, share it with their friends.
I mean, it will work, man. It certainly will. So definitely, I'm honing down, on that marketing piece. I thought I would get out, and kind of walk the ground and get into businesses, but I don't know. I kind of learned pretty quickly that it just wasn't the most efficient way to spend my time. Whereas with social media, you can do a couple clicks, spend some money, and instead of touching base with 20 individual people that you walk around, you can hit thousands. So I definitely shifted my focus a little bit in that, and trying to be as efficient as I can. But I mean, between now and then, there's other things I'm probably going to do that I wasn't even thinking of at this point. I will definitely, in the next week or so, yeah, I'm going to put out a press release, and it's going to hit all of the local media outlets, and then see if we can kind of pull up some I don't know, some buzz that way as well. And I've had a couple of people reach out. Brendan, over at the Orlando Shine, he wrote a nice little blog, about the event on there. And so that was great of him to do that. He's also offered, to kind of put me in touch with other people in the future, potentially maybe looking at other venues that might work as well. So
Love it.
he was
I
super
love it.
helpful. Yeah, so anyone that I've talked to, other organizers have been super supportive. I have just a ton of respect for what they do, because now I'm seeing, like you said, I'm wearing the different hat, and I'm kind of seeing what it's all about. So yeah, so like I said, we're trying everything. So if people have ideas, shoot me a message. I'm willing to try about anything to promote this event and just make it a success.
I love, and I think that's the key. I think is the big thing. I think like we people in Orlando want something like this, and it's just really will come down to it being a community thing of people saying, hey, like the Brendans of going, hey, like I know other places you could possibly do this at, or let me put you in contact with these people, because people want to have, it's like it's basically it's the community supporting the community. So like community supporting small businesses going into the community. Like I think it's great because it's people that like live in the Altamont and like the outside areas of it that are willing to go like, hey, nothing ever comes to Altamont, or I always have to drive down all the way down to like downtown or something, or into like one of the smaller districts, further east. I was like, this will at least allow me to now have something here. And then people that are maybe further out will actually be like, hey, this is actually close for me. This is a closer drive. So it opens up quite a bit of which is great because that's really the big thing as well for a lot of these small vendors that I believe is like there's people that maybe don't know you because you've only been selling at a certain radius, and at least now it's the radius is opening up because this is giving you opportunities. So I'm definitely excited. Obviously I want to make sure that more people need to know and be able to spread it. If you're listening to this, heck, even if you don't go to the event, share it. Tell people like, hey, there's this cool new event happening up. Go support them. Go do some shopping, and drive out there and go and support and go inside. And who cares if it's raining because we're indoors in AC, and you could do some shopping, get a cocktail or a coffee, and do some shopping.
Absolutely.
Kelly, what advice, since you're doing something new, I'm going to ask, what advice do you have for someone wanting to start something?
Yeah. So it's probably not too different from what I said the last time I was on. And I think mainly I just said, just do it, just jump in and go. I think it's probably a little variation of that. I mean, I think you have to just, at some point, just stop talking about it and make it happen. For me, though, I think it's important that, because I mean, I think a lot of us, like you and I, we have ideas every day. And there are things that kind of come into our head and things we think we should do and want to do. But it's those ideas that don't go away, the ones that kind of stick there and that you continually think about and you can't stop. You're laying in bed at night and you're thinking, oh, what if I did this? What if we did that? I mean, those are the things I think you focus on. And then, like I said, you just got to get started. I mean, to be honest, I should have done this last year when we first talked about it and just made it happen. But I mean, there was that fear, and I think you got to get over the fear and just kind of do it. If you fail in a year or two, you're not even going to remember it. Or if you do fail and you remember it, it's going to be lessons that you take from it. But it's not going to be, a big deal if it doesn't work out. So definitely just try it, make it happen.
Where can people tell people like how, as they're listening to this, obviously it'll be in show notes, but like tell people where they can actually, like, if as they're listening on this and they're on their phones, how can people go and learn more about Orlando Indie Bazaar, obviously more about your brand, Kelly Brott's Beard Care, but like how can they find out more about Orlando Indie Bazaar, like where to go, where it's at, where it's going to be at, so they get the right directions, things like that. Like where can they go and follow all the get all that information on social?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's pretty simple. For beard care, everything is at Brott's Beard Care. And mainly that's going to be Instagram, a little bit of Facebook, a little bit of Threads. Orlando Indie Bazaar is going to be the same thing. Everything's at Orlando Indie Bazaar. Most of the content is going to be on Instagram. So if you want to see like spotlights of the vendors that are going to be there, those are happening currently. There are obviously event details on there. If you're a prospective vendor, the application link is on Instagram. So that's a great resource. And then, of course, on Facebook, we've got our Facebook page with the event. So if you can get into that event, kind of interact with it, mark that you're interested, you're going, invite your friends, share it with people. I mean, I think those two mediums is where we can make the most reach and get the most people out there to learn about us.
Yeah, man, I agree. And again, the event is on August 24th and from 11 to 5, and it's going to be at give the location again so that anyone listening, they can hear it, so they can look it up, maybe throw it on their Waze, so or whatnot, so they get directions on how to get to the hotel.
You got it. It's at the Hilton Orlando, Altamonte Springs. The address is 350 South Northlake Boulevard, obviously in Altamonte Springs. For people who kind of know the area, you've got that intersection of sort of I-4 and 436. You've got Uptown Altamont, the Altamont Mall. It's just south of that. So if you kind of know where that is, you're right there.
That's awesome, man. I'm super proud of you and excited at the same time for you for this market. I think it's going to go well. I think there's going to be obviously some learning lessons will be learned or taught, but I think it's going to be a great opportunity. I think it's something that Orlando desperately needs. So I thank you very much for doing this, and creating the Orlando Indie Bazaar. Like I said, you've tried different things, even during COVID, to try to do like create ways of being able to market and be able to help us as a community of vendors. And I think it's super important to be able to, be able to kind of have something like this, another option, another way to be able to do it. And if it's something that you're like, hey, this is great, I love it, I want to do it maybe once or twice a year, or maybe a few times a year, because I figured out, and it's a great way to do it. I think it's going to be a great opportunity, and definitely an opportunity that, that someone should be able to take a control of, because I don't know. I think it's a smart idea to be able to do. Kelly, thank you so much for being on and chatting with me again. That's our show for today. Thanks to Kelly Brott of Brott's Beard Care and Orlando Indie Bazaar for being on. Definitely come see us. If you'll see it, because I'll get to plaster it all on all my social medias. I've already started plastering on my social medias, but I definitely want to make sure that if you see it, even if you can't go, share it. Tell your friends, hey, this is new. Check it out. And some cool vendors are going to be there. Go inside and don't have to deal with the heat. I mean, man, it is too damn hot out. Okay.
Yep.
If you want to support me, check out my brand, Deli Fresh Threads. You want to support me, come see me at Orlando Indie Bazaar. But definitely go online, shop, tell your friends. Thank you. Until next time, keep eating sandwiches and follow your passion. Thanks, everyone.